being 6:30 p.m. on Monday, September 21st of 2020, I'm just going to call the NDCAP meeting to order. And just before we go into a roll call of the members present, just trying to turn it over to the vice chair for a moment for a point of information.
Yes, to the public that's calling in, you're showing up on our attendees list here. And I have 2 people on the telephone, and I just wanted to let you know that when it comes time to make public comments or to speak, in order to raise your hand, you need to hit *9. And I don't know who you are because you're not coming in with your names. So if you want to shoot me an email, that works. 508, that works, but are you trying to raise your hand now? Are you trying to say something?
Are you talking to me, Pine, or someone else?
I was talking to that person.
Chairman Mahoney? Chairman Mahoney?
Yes, yes.
Is that
Yes,
Paul?
Chairman Mahoney, this is Paul Smith. Following the instructions I got from Comcast, I'm trying to call in. Do you read me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear, Paul. Are you hanging in for 2 hours like this?
It's my only means of communication. Yes, sir. It's an iPhone.
Okay.
Can PACTV turn him over to a panelist? Okay,
I think he is, because he's showing up now at the bottom of our screen with all the other panelists.
He is.
If he downloads the Zoom app, he can connect.
Okay. All right, Paul, I got you here in attendance. All right,
Okay,
fine. You all
thank you.
set?
Okay,
Yes,
all
sir.
set.
All right, we'll go back to the roll call of the members, starting with Ms. Dubois, and we'll just go across the screen
Appointed
to
by
the right.
Speaker of the House.
Mr. O'Brien,
Matt O'Brien, Manager of Government Affairs and Communications at Pilgrim.
Richard,
Richard Rothstein, Town of Plymouth Board of Selectmen appointee.
Rich Grassi,
Rich Grassi, Minority Leader of the House.
Mr. O'Reilly,
Governor Riley, Speaker of the House appointee.
Mr. Mullen,
Speaker, sorry about that, Minority Leader of the Senate appointee.
I'm glad we can hear you this month, Sean.
We'll see how that works out for you guys.
Okay, Jack,
Jack Priest, representing the Department of Public Health Radiation Control Program.
Senator Dan Wolf,
Dan Wolf, appointee of the Senate President.
Sam Phillips,
Hi, good evening. Sam Phillips, Director of Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency.
Susan Whitaker,
Hi, Susan Whitaker, representing the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development.
Mr. Nichols,
Dave Nichols, appointed by Governor Baker.
Mr. Johnson,
Hi, Dave Johnston, Mass DP, representing Secretary Theorides, Environmental Affairs.
John Flores,
Yes, John Flores here, representing Governor Charlie Baker.
Mr. Jones,
Robert Jones, Executive Office, Health and Human Services, representing Secretary Mary Lou Sutters.
I think we have everyone except for maybe Mr. Moylan.
John Moylan, Pilgrim Station Site Vice President.
And then we'll close up with Mr. Paul Smith.
Paul Smith, appointed by the Utility Workers Union of America, representing the good men and women who work at Pilgrim Station.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the first agenda item. Is the minutes from the previous meeting. So anybody have any comments on the minutes? Fine.
I think Jack had sent in that that his program is radiation control. Jack, is that right?
That's correct.
And we have line 40. It was 9 of 11 casks. That's all I have, other than an apostrophe on line 23. Anybody have anything else? That's,
All right, so I'll entertain a motion which takes into consideration those suggestions for changes.
So moved.
was that?
So moved.
I'll second it, fine.
Oh,
So we had a motion by Patrick O'Brien with a second by Mr. Sean Mullen. All those in favor?
fine, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so that passed unanimously. So we have, the next thing on the agenda is a reply from Secretary Theorides to the NDCAP letter requesting support. Pine, did we have something updating on this?
Yeah, so we got on August 7th, we got a letter back from the secretary basically saying that they'd love to continue supporting the website. They'll continue to do the minutes, and I want to thank them very much for that, because if there's something that I really abhor doing in meetings, it's taking minutes. But that we had asked for financial support so that the panel could hire experts and get some training if necessary. And the reply was that there is no such funding available, but they'll do what they can to help us out, and that the interagency work group will continue to work with us and provide updates and respond to requests for information as appropriate. I did send that letter around to everybody. I don't know if anybody else had any comments. Should I leave it at that? Sean has something to say, John.
Mr. Mullen.
My only point is that I applaud both of you for doing it to get them on record. I think the legislation is very clear. And I think that if the panel does determine that we need some expertise, we need some training, that in very blunt terms, we ought to just put it on them. The law is pretty clear. They are to provide the resources, including financial resources, to do these things. I know we've tried this in the past. I think you guys did a great job of getting them on record. And my only opinion is that if we need an expert on a given topic, or we want some specific training on a given topic, I would certainly be supportive of putting it right on them and say, look, this is really clear. It's what the law says. You got to do it.
I agree with your interpretation, Sean. I think
Any other comments?
Of course, the IWG is full of expertise, so we probably don't need any. Jack, David being.
We're here for you. You know, it's we're committed to the process and we're committed to help. And you know, we were tapping into 4 points as needed throughout the settlement agreement negotiations. So let's try to keep a productive, positive approach towards this. And everybody on this call from the interagency work group is committed to that. So if there's a particular point where we have particular questions, please share them with us and we'll do our best to get them answered for you.
David, I thank you. All right. Obviously, later in the meeting, there's a discussion, item number 8 on the NDCAP legislative mandate review. So we can, if any of you have any thoughts on this, that'll come up later in the agenda. So let's move on to item number 4. Patrick O'Brien was available to myself and Ms. Dubois last Thursday afternoon. We took approximately a 2-hour tour of the plant inside and outside. We went up top to view where the new pad is being constructed, but we'll just turn it over to Patrick right now for your site visit report, and your decommissioning update, Mr. O'Brien, okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm just gonna share my screen, make sure everyone can see it, and kind of walk through my presentation for this month. Everyone should be seeing my screen now. So thank you all, and hope everyone's well. Talking to the vice chairman today, actually, we had a good conversation, and one of the things that came up is how familiar some people are with the site. We did have a nice walk down with the chair and vice chair last week, and I do offer that to any panel member that wants to come and see the site to just reach out to me. I'd be more than willing to walk that down with you and show you the site so you have a better firsthand understanding. Just want to throw a high-level site overview, kind of showing where the new pad location is, the construction of the new haul path down the old shorefront access road, through the old K1 building, which has actually been demoed. I'll have more to speak to that later. Where the current asphyxia is located, the main stack location, which I'll get to later. That's an upcoming item for demo. The switchyard, turbine building, reactor building. The S110 buildings, which I'll speak to later, those have been demoed. So I'll go into a little more detail with pictures. The upcoming demo of a chain shack, the current warehouse, the trash compaction facility over here, just to give you the idea of the outfall, the intake, the breakwater from when we were running, the main entrance off of Powerhouse Road in off of Rocky Hill Road, and the engineering support building, which is where my office is. So I know we've seen this a lot. This is that waterfall schedule that was presented as part of the update in March to the NRC. Looking at where we are, we're right here in the September-October line. So we're still working our way through characterization, still in construction that John and Pine did see last week of the protected area, the haul path, the new protected area. We have finished that fuel campaign, which was where we dropped down here, and I'll be speaking to this a little bit. We'll be doing the reactor vessel internal segmentation work. We're still doing some early demo, which is some of those outbuildings we had talked to. So that's kind of where we are in the time frame from a long-term schedule purpose. So we did finish, since our last meeting, we did finish the fuel campaign. We finished all 11 casks. The last one was loaded on August 3rd. So we now have 28 total on the lower pad. Our next fuel campaign will begin in the spring of 2021. In concurrence with that, we will be moving fuel from the current pad to the upper pad once that new protected area and haul path are constructed and approved. We did in August, remove the control rod drive mechanisms. What that is, it's under the reactor vessel, and they were the mechanisms that used to push the fuel bundles in and out of the reactor. We took out 144 of those, I believe, and got those ready for eventual waste disposal. And then, like I said, the reactor vessel internal segmentation and the removal of greater than Class C waste will begin this fall.
Pat, that's could you
Sure.
help the panel members out a little bit and provide a little more detail on the last bullet on the vessel internals and the removal of the greater than Class C waste?
Sure, and I may ask John Moylan to tag in and help as well. But what we'll be looking to do is we'll be underwater. We'll be installing tools into the reactor vessel cavity to cut the dryer separator that was formerly part of the reactor up and prepare that waste for eventual disposition. We should be starting that in the next couple of weeks. We have a specialized contractor. GE will be in to do that. John, I don't know if you have anything to add to that specific project. John, you want to come off mute?
So, Pat, the greater than Class C waste, other than the fuel, that is probably some of the most radioactive components that will be being removed. So, removal and disposition where?
The DTCC waste will go on the pad.
So that waste goes into a dry fuel canister?
Correct. And it'll be placed on the pad.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. So we did remove the K1 building. This was a building that had previously stored some equipment for the dry fuel storage campaigns. This was taken down in the need for the new haul path construction. This was directly in the way coming out of the backside of the reactor building along the shorefront. So we did get that work down safely and on time. And then the S110 buildings, there was a group of buildings that I referred to earlier. Those have been removed again safely and on time. Well, the purpose behind the removal of these is the site has a limited footprint for us to be able to store some waste in an interim time frame before it is shipped. And this is the ideal location for us to be able to hold what will be Class B and Class C waste until eventual removal from the site.
So, Pat, those are just, again, to help my panel members out, those are basically steel shed type buildings on a slab. The surface, the shed was removed. The slabs are in place, not to be excavated at a later date.
Correct. Yeah, we are using those pads to store the waste. It was not below service removal of anything. It was just the standing buildings there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. So we have a couple of upcoming demo projects, and we've wanted to stay out in front of these conversations with the state, and I know Jack and Dave are both aware of these proposed projects from their site visit last month for the monthly meeting. We are looking to remove the 160-foot meteorological tower, which is that circle on the far left. And then we will be taking the main stack down to the building roof at the in the stack. The reason behind that is there are some guy wires that hold that up that are actually in the way of the haul path construction. So to ensure that we have safe travel of the fuel up the new haul path, we will be taking that down to the building roof. And then the other picture, the one closest to the water is a small area of concrete, like shed type buildings, and another sheet metal building. Those are looking to be removed again for some movement around the site, make it a little bit easier. Same with the other building, which we used to call the chain shack. So where you're looking at the chain shack right here, these are the S110 buildings just below it that have been removed. So this is another way to just create some space and allow us to move around the site a little bit easier during decommissioning. So this is kind of the early side demo that we talk about for the project.
So, Pat.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about the main stack? We've had some questions about its history. Could you talk a little bit about the radiation contamination monitoring that's going to be done before that's removed?
Yeah, we're working through that plan right now. We did put this project out to bid. Mark Lawson, who most of you heard from last month, is working that plan along with our demo team to ensure that we're staying compliant with everything. That's why we're doing the proactive meetings with the state at the same time to ensure that we're following everything we're supposed to be following.
So the Department of Public Health, since that's really the first outside the plant radioactive material demolition project, we want to make sure, and we have been, I'm saying this for the public, that we're engaged. We'll look at that plan as it's developed, as Holtec CDI moves forward with that part of the project.
Thanks, Jack. And then just the last slide I wanted to throw out. I know it's been a question. We are still trying to commit to helping the community, and obviously with a bit of an economic downturn due to COVID, we were able to this year provide $20,000 to the chamber for their programs to support the local businesses. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Pat, where's your mask?
In my pocket.
Oh, okay.
That was my bad. That was the day of the golf tournament, and Amy and Bob, I asked them, "Do you want me to put my mask on?" They said, "No, we want to be able to see your face." So
Patrick, a quick question on the I believe 220-foot main meteorological tower that I believe the agreement between the AGO office and Holtec was to remain during decommissioning. Can you briefly summarize where the monitored data goes or will go to during
So
the
yeah, so
activities?
as part of the agreement, we were allowed to take it down when decommissioning warranted it. With the work progressing on site. That is not the only tower still on site, so we're taking down one of the two towers. At a point in the future, when the second tower does come down, part of that agreement is the information will be shared will be National Weather Service data at that point. We still do have the other tower on site. All right. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and if there's any additional questions.
Any other questions for Mr. O'Brien? Fine. Did I see?
Yeah, I did have one in terms of following up on Jack's question about the monitoring. You'll share the monitoring. I guess I'm more concerned about it's likely that that is going to be some kind of treated waste, is it not? Because that was an exhaust mechanism for when the plant ran into trouble in the early 80s, if I'm not mistaken, or am I wrong about that, Pat?
And I know there's been surveys of it. I don't have the information at hand to speak to exactly how it's classified and what the demo plan is, but that would be something I know Mark and the demo team have.
But that's the point of the monitoring, right? Would be to determine, how you're gonna, whether you're gonna stockpile that stuff on one of those, concrete foundations that you.
Yeah, to classify whatever it would be, and then appropriately dispose of it in that manner. Yes.
Gotcha. Jack, I don't know.
So Pine, following up with Pat and both Jack, we've been meeting with the CDI folks and sharing ideas on what the pre-characterization process is going to look like and how, the monitoring programs and all that. So, that's something we're already working on. And as Jack mentioned, this is one of the kind of the first, substantial demolition. Everything else that's come down has been basically, steel sheds, not a big deal. This is a pretty big thing. And so we're going to, we'll work with them on how it's going to come down and what they're going to do to characterize it before it comes down, and what they're going to do to, monitor and all that when it comes down.
And following that, will there be a report that can be made public so that everybody kind of has that confidence that you guys have that everything's being addressed that needs to be?
We haven't talked about a written report, Pine, but we can take that up with Pat for sure. And certainly, our expectation is that we're going to be reporting out on it. So we'll be talking about how it went. And we'll talk about, the monitoring that was done and what we saw when we took a look at the pre-characterization. So,
no burial in the bay kind of thing,
No.
Well,
of course.
I have a little more to add.
All right, go ahead, Jack. And then Dave Nichols next. Go ahead, Jack.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So this is a physically tall object that we're going to work. It's visible in the community. From a radiological standpoint, I won't say it's not significant, but it doesn't, I'm confident that the plan that they'll have for that removal and the controls of the material and how it'll be prepared for storage and then shipment, that is not a high risk activity. It's more of a good opportunity to find out how we're going to communicate, how we're going to share plans as kind of a pilot model before we get into more risk significant work.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Dave?
Yeah, Patrick, can you talk, I understand the GTCC waste that goes into the spent fuel casks and how that process works. Could you talk a little bit more about how the low-level radioactive waste is going to be stored? You've got slabs there. I guess it's going in some sort of container. How you prevent, water infiltration and kind of protect that waste in the interim storage.
Sure, and John, feel free to jump in as well. But there are approved containers that we use for that. This will be we'll be having over on those slabs they're called Legio blocks. They're basically movable blocks that then have a cap on top of them to shield for radiation. So they'll be stored in that with the roof on it so that it is protected at all times.
Okay.
It's not only for the radiation, it's also for weathering, Pat.
Correct. Sorry, John.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Mr. O'Brien? Paul Smith, you okay?
Sean's got his hand up, John.
Yes, yes, sir. I'm enjoying all of this.
Okay, Sean Mullen, go ahead.
This is really probably for Jack and Dave and John and Pat. With the slabs there, I get that. But how does that all factor in to the pre-characterization? I mean, when you're looking at the whole site, if those things are in place, just walk us through, or at least me through, how do you do soil samples and all the other things that you want to do to make sure if those things aren't removed before the pre-characterization, that we know what might potentially be involved under those locations?
Well, when we talk about pre-characterization, right now we're talking about pre-characterization of the structures and eventually the foundations that'll come down and the foundations that'll come up and out. And, you know, the characterization process of the site is going to be ongoing. As things come out, they'll characterize what's under it. You know, they'll characterize it to the extent that they can before it comes out, but it's, you know, you're going to have much more visibility into it when it comes out. So the phase we're in right now is figuring out how we're going to get out in front of all the demolition activities that are going to happen. So we have, as Jack said, so we use this, you know, relatively low risk, relatively low impact demolition activity to really kind of test drive all the various pre-characterization of the demolition activities and monitoring and you know, screening for waste deposition and transport and so forth. So we'll get those under our belt, and then the characterization will be ongoing as they assess the site.
Sean, as to your question about the wastes and those footprints, where they've taken those buildings down, where they're setting up areas, I'll call them lay down areas, if they choose to store radioactive material there. Those containers are also, besides the concrete, the containers themselves are also weatherproof, DOT certified containers. And we already have, I'll call them suspect areas or critical areas that we know we want to look at where there's been some history, where those slabs will remain from what they just took down. Those do not fall under those areas. Like Dave said, that characterization is kind of a living process. So when they get to the point of getting ready to remove those slabs, much towards the end of the project, they'll still be obligated to excavate, sample, and report out what material they found underneath those slabs.
Thanks, both of you. Very, very helpful for me.
Did I answer your question?
Very well.
John, I had a quick question.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Hey, Pat, I couldn't tell from the slide. Have you guys actually started construction and clearing of the Hall Road yet? Is that underway?
Yeah, so the majority of that haul path is the road that was there previously to the shorefront.
Okay.
So the piece between where that K1 building was that was inside the protected area and if you're familiar, like that area over by the old parking lot, that area is kind of right now under progress.
And how about the new pad site?
New pad itself is done. Pad. John and Pine can say that. The security building is in process, and then like kind of the groundwork around the pad and the security building are underway.
Great.
Hey, Pat, what's going on with the wall along the road?
I can speak to that. So we got the state and the town's comments on the preferred, I'll say a visual aesthetic they want on the wall. We've committed to that. So part of the wall has started to be poured. And we have, I think there's some rebar already in place for the remainder of the wall to be poured. So we're working through that. When we got the initial comments from the town and the state, we put a stop on everything for pouring and worked through the comments. In addition, I'll speak to kind of the planting piece that we've talked about, and Dave and I have been back and forth a bit on this. Dave was nice enough to come down and walk the site. We're looking at a couple of additional options that could potentially remove some of the wastewater treatment facility, the leaching pits, that would allow us to plant a little bit further away from the wall, a bit more area to work with, as opposed to what we have based on the limitations of the current setup of the wastewater treatment facility. So we're working with Beals and Thomas, our engineering firm, to finalize a couple of options that we will then come back to the state with and talk through, state and the town.
So when
Maybe
you,
I can add just a little bit to that, if it's okay with the flow of our discussion here, and won't get to that in my briefing. But you know, Pat is correct. I went out there, took a look at what is poured, took a look at the placement of it relative to the wastewater infiltration areas and the wastewater piping from the wastewater treatment facility to the infiltration galleys. And when Pat talks about abandoning some of the galleys, the system is significantly over-designed for the current flow. It's been over-designed for the flow previous to the reduction in staffing out there. So right now, it's what they have is really a substantial overkill. So they have much more infiltration capacity than they're going to need for certain for what they have out there in the foreseeable future. So we're looking at the trade-off of giving up, you know, a small amount of infiltration capacity and having a good return in the robustness of the planning and the, you know, the potential for having it provide a good long-term visual barrier.
so at some point, Pat, I don't need the full tour. I've already had that. When you get a chance, I'd like to just go up and if you could show me that, just that site, that would be great.
Yep, anytime you want, Kevin. I'll work with your schedule. We can go up there real easy.
All right, appreciate it.
Anyone else? Pine?
Just two things, just for everybody's benefit, maybe on the call and stuff. What the leaching area that they're talking about is just for the wastewater treatment for what was the kitchen and the laboratories and all that sort of stuff. It has nothing to do with the industrial waste.
That's totally correct. It is sanitary waste only, just like a commercial building or a home would have. That's
right, and so and this is the area near Rocky Hill Road right there. And the second question is something that completely slipped my mind, so I'm gonna forget. Oh, what I was going to say, Kevin, is that to the panel, if you haven't been up there, I urge you to take Pat O'Brien up on his offer. It's well worth the visit. It's pain-free. It's stress-free. And, you know, if you can avoid going into the building, you'll save yourself a lot of time because the rigor of the security check is time-consuming. So if you stay outside and look at this area, you'll get a good view of the entire site, and you'll get a good perspective on, you know, the next steps that we're going to be going through. So I urge you to take him up on it.
And before we move on, I'll just second what Pine just said. Obviously, getting inside the plant is a certain level of, and rightfully so, bureaucracy and red tape, security-wise. But at a bare minimum, if you're a member of this committee, should at least get down to the new pad site. As Pine said, it's relatively pain-free. Patrick can get virtually anyone up there at any time, and you know, so far so good from what I saw. And you know, obviously, eventually everything is going to be removed from the first pad site and up to this current site, which is being constructed, which is obviously at a higher elevation and further away from the coast. So if you're so inclined to get there, reach out to Patrick and please get there at the bare minimum. All right, so we'll move on to Dave Johnson. Dave, you have any sort of update from the IWG?
Sure, and thanks everybody. So I do. So excuse me. So we already talked about the vehicle barrier. So if there's any more questions on that, we'd be happy to answer them. We've also talked about the demolition update and the planning effort, and I think we've we've exhausted that discussion. But if there's any more questions around that, please feel free to ask. So we met with Holtec and CDI back in August on the 15th. As a condition of the settlement agreement, we were required to meet to go over CDI Holtec's plans for doing their decommissioning and complying with the settlement agreement. That meeting took place, and subsequent to that meeting, Jack and I have been continuing to coordinate with Holtec and CDI, including meeting on site and going over things, in addition to my site visit on relative to the vehicle barrier. So as we all, I think, know, the next big deliverable is going to be the site assessment work plan, which is due on the 15th, and that is before our next meeting. So a lot of what we're working with right now with Holtec and CDI is their planning towards having that work plan put together. And so I think that is it for the projects that I am most involved with and Jack is most involved with. Also, from MEMA's perspective, and I'll ask Sam to pipe in here if I don't cover it adequately, but MEMA has reconvened the Pilgrim Working Group, and those folks are meeting quarterly beginning October 21st. And that's revolves around emergency management planning. And that's going to be with the emergency management, public safety reps, and Holtec. Sam, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, you covered it. I mean, that's a group that was meeting, and then as outlined in the settlement agreement, that's the group that will continue with the training and the exercises in partnership with Holtec, and Pat and Dave Noyes have been great about participating and attending.
Thanks, Sam. So lastly, we had a question come up at the last NDCAP meeting relative to DPU and the involvement of DPU on the sale of Boston Edison to Entergy, and we looked into that, and as best we can determine, there were no conditions on that sale that would last beyond the actual transaction. And I think there was also a question of whether DPU has any ongoing involvement with Holtec throughout this process moving forward. And as best we can determine there, the answer to that is no, because Holtec is not an energy company per se, and they're no longer generating energy out there. So I think that speaks to the DPU questions. That's really all I have for this this month. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Yes, good Chairman Mahoney. Back to Mr. David Johnson. I think I might have been involved in the phrasing of the question to the good Commissioner Hayden of the DPU and this whether the decommissioning agreements having to do with deregulation being passed in 1998, 1999. He did have his legal arm review all of the findings of the DPU, and it is rather detailed, worth the read. I reviewed it. I certainly can't disagree with it, and it would seem like there are no stipulations or requirements over Holtec at this time, and that's what I got out of the DPU settlement agreement. So I thank you for the effort, and the lawyers have spoken.
Mr. Rothstein?
David, I think responding to a question I had at the July meeting, you mentioned that the 4 points contract had already ended. And getting back to some comments earlier today at the meeting, I think to Sean's, that if the panel had some technical questions or issues, and if we can't hire our own experts at this point, and we contacted the IWG, what kind of resources are available without 4 Points, or do you have other consultants working on behalf of the Commonwealth that you could draw upon?
But we don't right now. 4 Points was hired to get us through the settlement agreement process. And I haven't personally tracked all their expenditures, but it's pretty much exhausted. They have been really good about answering the phone. So, I think depending on what we receive from you folks, if Jack can't answer it, or with his expertise, or the expertise here at Mass DP, or with MEMA or elsewhere, and it's something that we think really needs to be answered, and it's beyond our current capabilities or the expertise we have in-house, which I think is pretty substantial, frankly, then I think 4 Points is probably the first place we would look. But so I can't commit to how that would happen, and I'm not aware of anything in place right now. But we're going to try to do our best to support this effort through the IWG, and if it's something we need to take elsewhere, then the folks at this panel will take that up with the folks we work with on that panel, and see what we can do.
Okay.
Fine.
I have a question that occurs to me since our site visit, and it has to do with the transmission yard, which I know was transferred or sold to Eversource. And that includes all the equipment that would carry power. What I don't know is how is it functioning now, and if DEP or anyone has any oversight over that, considering that in the past there's been issues with transformers and leaks and stuff. So I'm just kind of wondering how that fits into the oversight at this time, because it's not going to be ripped down, right? It's not going to be taken down by Holtec. It's we don't really know if it's going to be repurposed, and I don't have any idea what it does. Can you answer that, Dave? Or Pat?
I'll let Pat answer what it does. It's still in use, so it still plays a role in the grid, and for the foreseeable future, it will do that. But we are cognizant of its existence, and it has been wrapped into the settlement agreement, so it will need to get assessed. And I do believe, Pine, you're correct, that there have been releases out there before of transformer fluid, which were properly reported and also properly addressed at the time. So we're aware of those. And, we did leave some room in the settlement agreement to carve out the transformer pad and not assess it at a different time necessarily, but accept the fact that Holtec CDI has leased out that equipment to someone else. And as long as it's actively playing a role in the grid, and that's something we can't move away from, it might limit the accessibility of what needs to happen out there. But that doesn't suggest that the assessment and cleanup will not still occur out there. It's conceivable, though, that it will occur on a slightly different timeline than some of the rest of it relative to complete remediation.
Yeah, I think my my general concerns, I mean, like I said, I don't really know the part it plays in the grid, since it's not taking power from the plant and delivering it into the system anymore. Is it a receptor for power coming from somewhere else and then redistributing it? But the real subject of my concern has to do with its location, and that it does get wet there occasionally. So, it's just a question of oversight, and how are we going to do that if it's a divided site? that's really, it's just a logistical, regulatory sort of question.
Well, again, I think, Pat will have to answer the question on why it's important to the grid at this moment in time. I know it still plays a role in the grid, and that's why it's there. But it does fall under Mass DP oversight for remediation. And Holtec CDI, by virtue of being a past owner, and I believe a current owner, albeit a current owner that has leased the property out to someone else, they maintain the responsibility of doing the work, and the settlement agreement addresses that. And it addresses it specifically, recognizing that, right now that's still doing some work out there. And we have some other parties involved, but Holtec CDI is still going to have to look at it, assess it, and remediate it.
So, and Pat, can you just make clear, you've leased the property and sold the equipment?
Correct, yeah, and it was Entergy, so it was same day that the plant actually ceased power operations, so May of 2019. That equipment was sold to Eversource, as it is a key connection to the grid. There's two different 345 kV lines that come. One goes down to Canal Station, one goes out to Carver, so it's a connection point in the grid. And then we do still own the land under it, for that exact reason, the cleanup piece down the line. And that it is I think it is still technically on the NRC licensed land. So we'd have to go through that process. But Dave is right. We did specifically address that in the settlement agreement, knowing that, it's considered a key piece of infrastructure in the grid. Honestly, I think Eversource would be able to speak to why that is. What we are doing right now is, because of some of the setup, and I think we mentioned it to you when you were on site, we are disconnecting the control room that we have here on site from that switch yard, because at the time we were generating power, those connections that were easier to have in the control room. So we are working with Eversource to separate the switch yard completely from the plant proper.
Thank you both.
John Mullen.
I've been asked by several of my neighbors, actually, this question, and is it possible, Pat, maybe to invite your colleagues from Eversource in for a future meeting to really explain to the community more than you guys, because obviously you folks understand it, how the switchyard is still involved, because as Pine said, from a simplistic view, well, we're not putting out any power through that into the grid. Would it be possible for you to invite someone from Eversource that could explain the importance of this in the grid operation, particularly for these two major feeds, and how long they anticipate that'll continue?
Yeah, I'm sure we could reach out to one of our contacts over there. I don't know who the exact right person would be, but I have no problem making that ask.
Thanks.
Yep.
Patrick, if you have any success, let me know, because it's my intention in October to have a representative of the New England ISO come in and give a boilerplate presentation on the grid to the committee. So
he might have he might have good information on it too, is why it's a key point in the grid. So, but I'll ask Eversource as well.
And if he's coming in, I'll give him a heads up on that topic. But if you have any success with that Eversource, please let me know. Richard.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Pine's question. Patrick, there's still power coming into the plant from off-site, though, because you have to maintain, the pumps and systems to keep the spent nuclear fuel pool pumps going, and the emergency diesel generators, just in case. So it's not like there's no power. There may be nothing going out. The plant shut down, but there's still power coming in. Needed power, that is.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, Pine, you all set?
Rich Grassi.
I'm sorry, Rich Grassi?
Quick question for Patrick. Patrick, on the last presentation you gave last month, you labeled the schedule as just a decommissioning schedule. This month, you put a confidential sensitive label on it. Is there any different handling instructions that go along with that label, or should we just treat it?
I'll double check it. It should have been the exact same schedule because I haven't changed that out of the presentation. If I put that in there, it shouldn't have been because that's the schedule that was publicly available in the March filing with the NDCAPs. That's the publicly available schedule.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out, though. I'll take a look.
Chairman Mahoney?
Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Yes, one last question from myself, reviewing the good presentation Mr. O'Brien gave. It had to do with the removal of the stack piping itself from the roof on up. And possibly, I'm asking too detailed a question for it to be answered here, but at some time, so with the piping gone, am I to understand there'd no longer be a standby gas treatment system? And secondly, is there potential access because of the size of the piping that might now be open that hadn't previously been considered? Again, possibly too detailed to be answered tonight, but sometime it is convenient.
Let me see if I can, unless John Moylan has an answer off the top of his head, I'll defer and I'll get you an answer. But I know a lot of that'll be part of the demo plans and securing that building obviously once the stack comes down. So there wouldn't be an open egress, obviously.
Okay, understood. I can wait. Thank you very much.
That is a good question, Paul, about standby gas and how that fit into the old emergency plan. So that briefing information may be useful to Sam Phillips and the emergency plan people as well, Pat.
Understood. Writing it down right now, Jack. Thanks.
All right, we'll move on to item number 8, NDCAP legislative mandate review. Discussion. I think in your packet, the language was provided, the enabling legislation, predominantly section 14. The makeup of the committee. And if you want to lead this off, Pine.
Do I want to lead it off? I think Dave was, we were, this came up as a result of our discussion or the beginning of our discussion about whether we wanted to continue with some of the work groups we had the previous 2 years. And Dave, I think you brought up that it might be a good idea to take a look at the enabling legislation. And there's been quite a bit of discussion back and forth from the public, I think, about this as well. That, the public really wants a lot more participation and involvement. And they focus I think what we want to do is go to paragraph H and I, because we already covered G that says Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs shall furnish administrative support to the panel. We did that part. But here we're talking about providing all relevant members of the panel relevant information within the control of the Department of Public Utilities relating to subjects within the scope and duties of the panel, provide workshops or training for the panel members as may be appropriate, hire experts, contract for services, and provide for materials and other reasonable and necessary expenses of the panel as the commissioner may consider appropriate. And that was the commissioner of DPU at the time, I believe, if I have that right, anybody. And then paragraph I is the panel shall serve as an advisory capacity only and have no authority over the direct decommissioning, as much as would love to. The duties of the panel shall be to commence public meetings as frequently as at least quarterly, to hold a minimum of 4 public meetings each year post-shutdown, which is where we're at right now, to advise the governor and the court and the agencies of the Commonwealth and the public on issues relating to the decommissioning of Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station without having any authority on that, with a written report, which we have to address next, being provided annually to the governor and to the energy committees of the general court, to serve as a conduit for public information and education on and to encourage community involvement in matters relating to the decommissioning of Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station, and to receive written reports and presentations on the decommissioning of the station at its regular meetings. Thank you, Patrick O'Brien. To periodically receive reports on the Decommissioning Trust Fund. You want to do that next meeting?
It's done annually in March when it's updated.
And other funds associated with the decommissioning of PNPS, including fund balances, expenditures made, and reimbursements received. 6, to receive reports regarding the decommissioning plans for PNPS, including any site assessments and post-shutdown decommissioning assessment reports, and provide a forum for receiving public comment on these plans and reports, and to provide comment on these plans and reports as the panel may consider appropriate to the various state agencies and the owner, and in the annual report described. So that's the legislation. I think the public, what I have heard from the public is they're dismayed that they don't have more time to talk. We certainly get some thorough and energetic comments from the Lamperts relative to a lot of this. And I think the question is, you know, do we change how we're going about our business? I think there was a lot of discussion today about our meetings are too short. I know all the panel members feel that way. That was a joke. That wasn't a joke.
You delivered that so well. I didn't know if you were kidding.
Sorry, deadpanning it. So this is the discussion. How can we live up to the standard of the legislation? Provide some thinking outside the regulatory framework to the agencies. I think Dave and Jack are here for that reason. I don't think they're the only ones. I think Sam is definitely here for that reason as well. Robert Jones could tell me what his interest is so that we can give him some advice sometime on how we feel. And same with Susan Whitaker. We were talking a little bit before he got on, I think, about, what the potential was for economic recovery once the site is cleaned up. So that's it for my opening. Shall I call it, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Dan Wolf.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Pine. There's so much comment in current events that, gee, if only we had the framers of the Constitution around to answer these questions, and what would they think of what's going on now, and what would they write about it? Well, in this case, you do have the framers of the legislation. Not that it came out exactly as we had intended at the beginning.
Right.
I do think, and this is a conversation I'd like to hear, I wouldn't necessarily like to lead it. If an interagency working group had existed at the time that we wrote this legislation, the legislation would have looked different. And I think it's really important, this discussion, it's really important that it be had in such a way that there's synergy between the panel and the IWG, but not duplicate work. That I guess is my biggest concern. So I think the conversation I'd like to hear is how does the relationship, without regard to the specifics of the legislation, all of those tasks I think need to be continued. But the question really to me that's intriguing is exactly what is the relationship between the IWG and the panel so that it is not duplicative the work, so that it is synergistic, and so that all of the resources of the Commonwealth through the participants in the IWG are available to the panel so that questions are answered in a timely, thorough way by an objective source to the benefit of the citizens of the Commonwealth. I just will editorialize and say, I think too many of the questions that are being asked are being answered by the entity that has the financial interest. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, Patrick, I've really grown to respect you. I think you guys are honest brokers. This is not a slam in any way of Entergy or any of the existing entities. It's just that if you want objective feedback, you don't go necessarily to the people with the financial interest who are doing the work. So I guess, my hope would be that as the relationship with the IWG evolves, that there is more presentation about the technical aspects of this from either IWG or 4 Points, who seems like a very, very good consultant to be engaged. So that's a conversation I guess I'd like to hear is, what is the relationship going forward and what are the synergies? And in closing, I would just say, I'm not convinced, and Rich, I'm looking at you because I was on your committee. I'm not convinced that the working groups of the panel are exactly the best vehicle to do that. I'm not convinced that they're not either. But I think this is evolutionary. And I think to go back to the legislation as drafted, which remember, it got watered down and corrupted in conference committee. This is not the legislation that we initially in the Senate filed. I will, full disclosure, I will say that. And some of what got, I think, corrupted, unfortunately, was the makeup of the panel, such that as we learned in the last few years, it's hard to take the votes that I think are in the interest of the citizens of the Commonwealth, because by the time you do it, there are too many people that either have to recuse themselves or have interests that are not necessarily aligned with the citizens of the Commonwealth. So having said that, we tried to amend the legislation. I think if we tried to do that again, we might have equal success going forward. So I think, we should focus on the legislation as it exists and then what the relationship is with the IWG, which, by the way, is a huge, huge success for this panel to have the IWG engaged. And so, looking at Jack and David and the rest of the folks from the state agencies, I really appreciate all the work that you continue to do, and a lot more to come, obviously. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Paul Smith, you okay?
Yes, sir. Still present.
Okay. All right. Just checking. Anyone else? Well, all right. Mr. Rothstein.
I'll get down a little bit into the weeds. I think having the advantage of having Zoom meetings is that could have slightly longer meetings. I mean, our colleagues from the state agencies don't have to come down from Boston, fight the traffic, go back, so forth and so on there. So I think there's certainly an advantage there. But in terms of, I certainly miss not being all together in person. Plus, we probably would have a lot more people possibly attending from the public if we were meeting at Town Hall in the great room too. But at least in terms of having a longer meeting, I think there's an advantage to the Zoom. The other I had was that one of the things I tried to do when I was chairing the Nuclear Matters Committee, and I think Sean early on when you were chairing the NDCAP and having presentations, presenters come in, I think in the agendas we tried to have public comment right after each segment, right after a presentation, before everything being jammed in at the end. I know sometimes, even when I was sitting out as a member of the public before being appointed to the panel in late 2018, that I would have liked to have been able to ask the questions right at the time of following a presentation, and then trying to remember, okay, what was I going to ask? And then, anyways, just a thought, simple suggestion in that regard.
Jack Priest.
John, thank you.
You're welcome.
It might be worthwhile to reach out over to Vermont and talk to the panel chair there, John or Pine, and ask them how did they integrate their public comment. I know that their meetings do run longer than ours, but their frequency is, I think, quarterly now. But they went back and forth because I went to a few of their meetings, and at one point they did like stop and open up for public comment after each presentation. And then I think they changed it to the end because it got distracting and it really put the agenda off track. So I would ask them what their experience was with that before we would make a change like that. We get a good group of public people that come in and offer comment, and Sean always tried to accommodate what the number of people had with that time slot. I can understand, we've had a couple of meetings go long, which shrunk the public speaking time period. So maybe adjusting that might help. I would, based on what I saw at other public meetings, I would not open it up for comment after every presentation because you run the risk of derailing the meeting.
Sure.
My 2 cents.
No, I appreciate that, Jack. And the last thing that I want to do, or anyone I'm sure on this committee wants to do, is suppress any member of the public's ability to come and ask a question or make a statement. Okay. And obviously in the last 6 months, we've been in this bizarro world. PAC Television has a task in front of them in the next month or so, and they're trying to retrofit not only Plymouth Town Hall, but several other town halls on the South Shore under their purview. And God willing, I'm hoping that we transition to a hybrid meeting in October so that those individuals, including myself, who feel comfortable with brick and mortar, can attend a meeting because obviously the Great Hall is available to us. And those who don't, especially, representing the state, if you want to stay home and continue to Zoom in, you can do that. I agree with Richard Rothstein. I believe that if that occurs, obviously, mask appropriate, social distancing, I think we'll get some people who will show up, in the seats as we used to do at the Little Theater of PCIS. And I'm hoping that will, have some of these perceptions go away as, God willing, we transition back to some sort of a semblance of a normal life. A few years ago, I traveled with Mr. O'Reilly and a few others, and we went up to Vernon, Vermont. We attended one of those meetings. And I believe that we've had some of those individuals also come down to Plymouth. So I've met some of those individuals. And Jack, I'll certainly reach out to the chair and see what I can find out ahead of the next meeting.
John,
Mr.
I just want
O'Reilly?
to clarify. Oh, I was going to clarify one thing, if I may.
Go ahead, Richard, and then Kevin.
Yeah. I said before, I was referring more to the public having an opportunity to ask a question than to the presenter, but not making a speech or comments or agreeing, disagreeing, whatever. Just, to narrow it so we wouldn't get bogged down with comments till the end of the meeting. The questions I feel are legit from the public.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you. Kevin.
No, I just wanted to echo what Jack said. Thank you, John. And yes, we did go up to Vermont, and I've had a number of conversations with the chair over the years, and I would just want to reiterate and agree with what Jack said. I think we've got a good process in place, and we should stick with it. Thank you.
Sean Mullen?
I I find myself in total agreement with too much, obviously, tonight. One of the frustrations over the past 3 years with this part of it, and I think I'm not sure there's much we can do to improve it, is quite frankly, the media, that's how you really reach people, doesn't regard this as a story. I don't know, for example, this evening, if we have anybody attending from the public, from the media. I can personally tell you that I did everything I possibly could do to get folks interested, to have them understand the challenges and the importance of what was going on. But if we were to form another work group, I would say we've got a number of people on this panel who are very good at getting media attention. If the people in the communities involved are not reading about it, then the activists, the people who've been concerned and passionate about this for years, are the folks that continue to carry the public's water on this. And I don't know that I have an answer to this, but I will tell you that from my read 3.5 years ago of the legislation, one of the key pieces of this was to try to get media attention. And it's not a criticism of any of the folks in the public media that have covered it. It's that it's very, very difficult for these serious issues to get their attention when they live by the click. How many clicks do they get? We've got some great reporters who have occasionally covered the stories relating to the NDCAP, to Entergy, to the Holtec acquisition, to the NRC. But if you don't get those folks always informed and involved, if you don't give them a reason, if they can't convince their assignment editors, then it's just not going to do enough to educate the public. And there's, it's I don't mean to be pessimistic about it. I feel much as I do about it as Senator Wolf's thoughts on the likelihood of getting any changes to the legislation. But I'm just throwing it out there that for 3 years, I can tell you personally, I spent a lot of time trying to get the media's attention on this. Sometimes we were a little successful, most times we weren't. But that's the only way that you can really, really educate folks, is by getting them to hear about it and read about it and get a little bit more engaged and involved. So that's my only comment on it.
Dave Nichols?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of echo some of the comments that Sean made. I think that for me, the first priority is getting information out to the public. And I think we do a really good job of that in getting the reports and making some of the information that we receive available to members of the public. I think there's probably some technology lessons that we can learn here, maybe working with some of our partners in the state to create a more visible docket. When people make comments, and I've learned a lot from the Lamperts and others in the public over the past several years, but all of their comments don't necessarily need to be made orally. And so improving the process for how we receive comments from the public, so they're in a format where we're not just relying on them to be sent around via email, but we create, a repository somewhere for these documents to live, or these letters and comments to live, I think makes a lot of sense. There's been a lot of advancements in technology on that front, like create a Microsoft Teams page, or we do something like that so that it's easier to facilitate the public comment and interest, including questions that the public has that they want panel members to think about asking. So I think there's a lot of benefit there. I would also say that, social media is one way to get information out to the public, and maybe we need to look at a little bit of self-promotion of the activities of the committee on social media. Like, does the committee need a Twitter page? Does the committee need a Facebook page? There are some opportunities out there to push additional information that the committee is receiving out to members of the public that go a little bit broader than just the people that are attending the meeting in person or watching on PACTV. So I think there are a couple opportunities for us to do more self-promotion and to use technology to facilitate more public comment and more public interest for those that feel like that 5 minutes isn't enough to weigh in on some of those decisions.
Okay, anyone else? All right, we're going to move on to the next. Fine.
Something. Yeah, I'm not a social media type person, but I do have meetings, and I think we might throw this out to the public soon for a comment and whatnot. I always find that that it's difficult to squeeze in everything that we should be doing, and sometimes we don't do a really good job of organizing that, and hopefully we can get a little bit better. But I'm not adverse to trying to have a public forum on this, just a public forum, so that as a Zoom meeting, that allows the public to do a public dump on what they would like to see from us. For those that aren't as well versed in legalese as Mary and Jim are, to be able to get their voices heard, and then to be able to try and digest that and bring that back to the rest of the panel. I'm not adverse to that, and I don't know how anybody else would feel about it, but that was the value that I felt with the working groups. They were a little bit more relaxed. They were a little bit more informal. They had more public participation, and so there could be a little bit more airing of what's on your mind, because I don't really feel like our problem is that we're not educating the public. I feel like our problem is we're not digesting what the public needs to know and has concerns about. And if there's something that needs to be addressed that we're not paying attention to, because there is a lot of concern. I mean, I don't know how to micromanage the money, but there's definitely reasons why Mary and Jim are concerned that there's not enough money in the decommissioning fund. But I don't have the time to read all of the stuff that they write, certainly. So is there a better way for us to be able to digest that? I think David Nichols, I think your idea of, and I'm not saying that I know what Microsoft Teams is, but I think that the idea is right, that there needs to be a repository so that we can pull the stuff in, keep it organized, and not lose it. Because it is a process. It's not the same kind of process that it was years ago. It's a different process. So what are all those concerns? Basically, there's some trust issues. Let's deal with that by being transparent. Do they know something we don't know? Let's find out what that is. That kind of thing. So I feel like we need to be a little bit open to that and find a method that is useful to everybody in order to be able to digest it without the meetings becoming so burdensome that we can't attend them anymore. That's it, John. All yours.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next topic. So the next topic is annual report, the task and assignments, material for inclusion. The objective here is to get our third annual report up to the governor's office by New Year's. So we've got a few months to work on this. The year in review, CDI schedule issues, pad construction, waste transfer, site characterization, etc. IWG agreement, what this means, energy and sea level, options for the future of the site, formula for success. So Pine has this in her possession. Obviously, I'm more than willing to, take some time out and sit down with Ms. Dubois and see what we can do as far as we building on the last two reports. If anybody has any thoughts, please let us know now. And obviously, if you're available to help, don't be afraid to reach out to the two of us.
So I think one of my questions is, Dave and Jack, can the IWG give us, a summary document so that we don't have to put the whole agreement in there? I think Rich Grassi was one that asked. I asked Seth Schofield, and I got a reply from him that he didn't have a summary, and that he was so slammed this week that he couldn't get us anything. But is that, is that something that you guys can do for the annual report so that it is available to the public mostly? I don't want to write your piece. DJ?
I mean, we can talk to Seth about that. The settlement agreement is public information, so there's nothing in there that's a secret.
Right.
The problem when you try to boil something down is we might miss something or mischaracterize something. Jack and the other folks in this team, Sam and Sue and Robert and, all the folks from the IWG that attend these meetings were among a crowd of people that helped develop the settlement agreement, final authored by the AGO. But every single word was carefully considered. So, I'm certainly open to talking to Seth, and I understand what you're looking for, and I personally don't have any reservations about that. I mean, when I write an email to the team on this thing, and the team is not just us, like at Mass DEP, there's 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 people that I touch regularly regarding Pilgrim, and I suspect at some point some of them will be coming to this meeting and talking about various things. So so in that regard, I don't mind trying to do something with Seth, but I don't want to mischaracterize anything and end up having a problem because we don't capture it.
Jack?
Well, let me reach out to my our esteemed predecessor, former Chairperson Mullen. I got just a philosophical question on this part of the report. Should we spend our time kind of parroting something that's already out there publicly, or would we be better served saying, yeah, we think you hit the nail on the head with this agreement, or the panel, based on our feedback from the public, thinks we missed something that may need to be addressed in the future?
Jack, I mean, in this, perhaps all the panel members don't realize this, but over the past 3 years, Jack has played an instrumental role in doing what Pine, I think, and John are pointing to, which is there is a time-consuming, rigorous process to writing this report. And over the past 3 years, Jack has given us hundreds of hours, unless he writes a lot faster than I do. And others, Rich Grassi, Bertruzzi, I mean, many, many people helped in the past. I think the challenge we're facing as a group, and it's one of the, quite frankly, blessings of having John and Pine now assuming the role that Kevin and I did, is that it's tough to figure out in the first instance, what do we want to include? And it's more difficult following that of who's going to write this, who's going to put this together, how we're going to circulate it, how we're going to get comments. It's not an easy process. And I agree with you, Jack, that just republishing what has been done elsewhere is not a good idea. And my personal advice is to elevate it to the highest level for the outline form of those things that are the most important to explain to the governor, to the members of the general court, to the public. And this is where I go back again, since we've got Ben Franklin here on the panel, to go back to the founders, to the guys that wrote the thing, and that what we need to be able to do, in my opinion, and since you asked for it, Jack, is that the creation of the IWG and their involvement in this process, and then the AGO, is the single biggest thing that occurred in the first couple of years. And the execution of the agreement is the next biggest thing, is a direct result of the IWG's involvement and the expertise at the state. And I personally would suggest that what we focus on, in as brief a manner as possible for the public, is those highlights, not even at a summary level, that these are the things that have been accomplished, and this is what the panel believes as this evolving process continues. And again, I agree with Senator Wolf that as this evolving process continues, I love the idea frankly, maybe it's Dave's and Pine's, of having a 2-hour session just for the public. And if the members that can make it, if they watch it later, they can watch it. But I would suggest for this report to take it to a much higher level, beyond even a summary, almost at an outline level, to say, these are the major accomplishments, to really give the IWG and the AGO and the NDCAP the credit for what was done. And I said a couple of years ago, and I would reiterate it today, and like you guys, I've spoken with the chair up in Vermont and in a number of other states, including Illinois. I will tell you that what we were able to accomplish and what the IWG has continued to do on behalf of it, and I see a newfound level of cooperation with the company that I don't think would have been there unless they did what they did. So my advice would be to take it to a much higher level, because the burden of writing this stuff, this is hundreds of hours of work. And in the past, whether it was Rich, and I don't want to miss anybody, or Kevin, or you, Jack, you know how much time you put into this. And then it has to go through the panel. I would just, to the extent that we can, streamline that process a little bit by bringing it up a level and really focus on those big topics of what was accomplished and where it's going in the future, and include things like these new innovative approaches that Pine mentioned, to say, let's do it.
So
Dan, Jack, and then Dan Wolf.
Yep. So having some experience with Kevin and Sean and some of the other team members, here's my suggestion, John. So you need to put together like an abstract first. So you get the team, each member of the team, each member of the panel to say, I'm going to commit to send, what do I think are the 3 most important topics that we covered last year? And then you can consolidate those and make a decision on, doesn't have to be 3, it could be 5. You look at what the team members viewed as the most important, to consolidate that, and then you build your abstract off of that. And that could help focus on which team members you need to reach out to put the meat on the skeleton, so to speak. There's my Halloween analogy coming up.
Okay, that'll be due Friday.
Yeah. Dude, I gotta laugh.
You laugh, but it really took Sean and Kevin to have people live up to their commitment. I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Without directly saying it. You've got to really hold people's feet to the fire to meet that commitment, to get that information into you. So it makes, once you get that abstract rolling and you get your ideas focused, you'll pick up some speed on getting a draft together. It's just the getting past the impetus to get started, and where do I start and what am I going to include? So that's my suggestion, is get us as panel members to commit to give you 3 ideas of where we think if you had an opportunity in the elevator to give 30 seconds to the governor and he asked you, what do you think your team did this year? That's what we should be providing John and Pine.
Dan?
At the risk of stating the obvious, we have one of the most popular administrations and successful executive branches in the country relative to the public. And a lot of this has to do with how credible are we to the public, of the citizens of Commonwealth, who ultimately the executive branch and all of these agencies are accountable to. In a way, there's more a line of accountability to them than there is to us. As far as the writing of the report is concerned, who has the resources to do this? It is the folks who have agencies, who are involved in the interagency working group. That does not cut the panel out. I mean, I would suggest a serve and volley, similar to what Jack was saying, was the interagency working group needs to really articulate in a very thorough way what the agreement is and what the ongoing work is. That needs to be submitted to the panel so that the panel has an opportunity to refine it and comment on it, even if some of it is dissenting. And then that should be submitted to the governor and to the general court. Remember, this executive, these people work under the governor right now. So there's a lot of credibility with them in partnership with the panel actually doing much of the heavy lifting on this. I cringe, and I'm going to make my own personal confession at the end of the meeting, but I confess I don't have the capacity to spend hours and hours and hours working on this report. And just in the defense of the other people on the panel, all of whom probably have full-time jobs, I don't see how you do either. Plus, you're going to have to just pick the brain of the people on the IWG to write it anyway, or a lot of it. We need to make sure there's an opportunity for public comment in this report, and not cut out the comment and not undo what the intent of the panel is. But let's not undo the progress that's been made by helping to form the IWG and having that relationship in the writing of this report. It's a lot more credible if a lot of the work the IWG is doing is in it. And I'm not saying surrender to them or back out of the process, but I am seeing that should be the partnership. It should be with the IWG in drafting it.
I strongly disagree with you. So it's not the job of the IWG to write the report for this panel.
Jack, I'm suggesting if you want a thorough and accurate report, you don't have us as a panel feel in a black box of what the work is that you guys are doing and then try to interpolate. I'm not saying that's the final report, but I'm saying the start of that report needs to be the work that's being done by the IWG and the people decommissioning the plant. I'm not saying that the panel doesn't weigh in, but what are we supposed to do? Interview you guys to write a report? Who has the capacity to do that? We were given no resources in the panel to actually do this.
No,
so who's actually going to do it?
It was long Saturday and Sunday afternoons with us working with Kevin and Sean and the other people that are on the panel that gave up their personal time to develop that report.
And that should continue, but a lot more work has been done since those first two reports. And the quality of that work and the substance of that work has to be in this. And I don't know how many panelists have the ability to actually capture that and embody that into the report. I certainly wouldn't. So it needs to be more collaborative. I guess that's what I'm saying.
I just want to take a quick step back. Listening to Sean, who's got the voice of experience and wore the shoes with Kevin all this time. Sean was saying, if I heard correctly, is that the report should really be summarizing what did the panel accomplish, what did the panel do. But again, you may have already mentioned what you think the report should be about, but what do you think the ultimate reader, the governor's office, wants to see in the report? What does he want to get out of the report, assuming he takes the time to read it? And I hope he has, and I hope he will continue to do that. Other than saying, here's what the panel has done, or here's what the IWG has accomplished, but are they looking for further recommendations, or just what do you see?
It should be a gap analysis between the work that's being done, which is best known by the IWG, and the work that people on the panel and in the public think needs to be done that's not being captured by that. And the trouble is that can't happen unless there's a really thorough understanding of the work that's being done. And so I'm not suggesting we abdicate the responsibility of the report to the IWG, but I am saying if you're going to do that gap analysis of what's being done and what on behalf of the citizens through the panel and the citizens who are commenting at each of these meetings, you can't do a gap analysis without understanding what the reality of this is. So that's how I would like to see it. I'd like to see somebody say, here's exactly the work that's being done. And then I'd like the panel to be able to opine on what needs to be done that isn't. And I'd like the public to have the same opportunity to do that. That's, I guess, the answer to the question. I'm sorry if I'm not being clear.
I think that's right.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, Pine and myself will I wrote all those points down, and Pine and I will take that under advisement, and we'll get together in the next couple of days and try to formulate a plan.
But I was serious when I said we need your comments this week.
Oh, that obviously that's a given.
I don't see that's too much to ask of you guys that are on the panel to sit down and keep it short. Doesn't have to be full sentences. It can be 3 words for all I care in a bullet form that helps us remember what we did and what you remember, we know is important to you. And that's going to help us, be able to create an outline that we can then begin to work with. Because I think just us doing it alone is gonna be a slow process. And I'd like, we're late in the game here. I would like to speed it up, to answer the question. I think that's exactly right. The governor needs to hear what needs to be done. And the basis for why he should believe us.
It's helpful if you respond with a share all with the panel members, because what you write might stimulate an idea in one of our other panel members.
That's a great idea.
Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to the...
No real, external discussion per se, no violations of the open meeting law, please.
All right, we're going to move on to item number 10, which is topics for next meeting. As I said earlier, in a perfect world, as long as the execution is there from PAC Television, and the numbers are still trending the way they are at the state level, I'd love to at least move back to a hybrid meeting where some of us attend brick and mortar, the ones who are comfortable, and the other individuals who want to choose to continue to Zoom in will do so. If that happens, it's my intention to have lead the meeting off with a presentation boilerplate from the New England ISO or representative, Mr. O'Brien. Hopefully you can either attend physically or via Zoom. Do your, you have your continuous, update of what's going on with respect to the decommissioning. And if you can deliver anything with respect to Eversource and what's going on, as we talked about that topic earlier, please let me know, Patrick, and we can incorporate that. Okay?
Absolutely.
Does anybody else now have anything that they would like specifically to see on a potential October agenda?
October 19th, we're talking about, John?
Yeah. Is that the date? I don't have it in front of me. Monday, October 19th?
That's the Monday. That's the third Monday.
Okay. If anything comes to mind, don't be afraid to reach out to any one of us. All right. We'll move on to public comment and questions.
Mr. Chairman, before you do that, could I just make one comment?
Absolutely, Dan. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I apologize for dragging this to the end of the meeting, but this will actually be my last meeting with NDCAP. I will be resigning as of around the October 1st. And I really just want to thank everybody. This has been an amazing process. Made some friends. Sean, I love the way you led it. You did a great job, and I thank you for that. And John and Pine, I thank you very much for stepping up. And as I said before, the folks who are employees of the Commonwealth, I think, are doing a great job. I love the collaboration of the corporations involved. Pat, thank you for that, and for all the citizens who have been involved. I've really enjoyed it. I dare say I'm going to miss it, and I'm sorry I won't be back with you in person. But again, I just thank you all for the opportunity to serve, and it has been a pleasure. And I think a tremendous amount of progress has been made. I think it's on a really good track. It's not perfect, but it's in a really good place. So I just want to thank you for that.
Go ahead, Pine.
I just want to thank you, Dan, so much for your involvement, your engagement, your getting it going in the first place, stepping up to the plate, and being so effective. I've really deeply appreciated your clarity, your point of view, and your expertise. And as I said before, I'll miss you. So come back when you can.
Thank
Sean?
you, Pine. And Vinny DiMacedo, a great partner too.
Yeah, I mean, Senator, you and Vinny, if it were not for both of you, none of this would have happened. We don't know what the outcomes would have been. So the NDCAP, the Commonwealth, certainly the region, all deserve to tell you how much we appreciate what you did at the beginning and throughout. I personally have got to say that there is no one more irascible that I enjoy on a regular basis than you. It's it really has, but not to just belabor this, but we wouldn't be here without you guys. And despite the legislation, and I think you used the right word, being corrupted at the 11th hour, and despite the realities of what we face in the general court today, we've done a great job. And it's all because of what you and Senator DiMacedo did at the beginning. And I just wish you had stayed past 11:30 that night so they couldn't have slipped that fastball by you, but that's just another thing. Thank you.
That was a conference I wasn't invited to, but thank you, Sean. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, Dan, I always certainly appreciated your insight with respect to your private sector business that you have down on Cape Cod and how you made the analogies to this committee. And obviously being on the inside up at Beacon Hill, that was invaluable, the advice in two respects. And once you replied to my email today, I did remember the story that you had told me about how you met my wife. So how you met your wife, I'm sorry. And I'll say this again, and I could get into trouble, but yes, the Impudent Oyster is my favorite restaurant in Cape Cod.
We'll meet there. That's a deal.
Okay.
Thank you. Public comment.
All right, public comment. Fine, I see a question and answer in the queue.
That is from John Nichols, whose computer was running out of power and he couldn't wait.
All right, do you have anything else, or do you want me to read that question into the?
You can go ahead and read that, and I'll get organized.
Okay, so Patrick, it looks like this is coming at you. You can't see this, can you? Can you see it? All right, I'll read it, and then you can take a crack at it.
Henrietta's question. I mean, I'm not going to say much more to the fact that we've spoken to the cast numerous times. I mean, hers is more of a statement than a question.
No,
right,
no,
so-
it's not. No, it's not Henrietta's. It's
Oh, then I'm not seeing. I'm sorry. Then I'm not seeing it.
All right,
the
Patrick,
cute
let me
name.
just read this. This is coming in from an individual. I don't see a specific name.
Okay.
Will the casks be made thick wall? Is concrete going to be weapon-proof? Will Holtec be forbidden from transporting waste to the Southwest because of risks of travel? That's it. Will casks be made thick wall? Is concrete going to be weapon-proof? Will Holtec be forbidden from transporting the waste to the Southwest USA?
So the casks are NRC-approved designs. They have appropriate rigor. I've shared with this panel before the testing that's been done where they fired missiles at the casks and they come back without the damage. So you know, they're appropriate to the issues. And what was the third one, John? I'm sorry. The move to the Southwest. So
yes.
I think everyone knows, you know, Holtec, you know, responded to an RFP by the Eddie Lee Energy Alliance in New Mexico for the potential to do consolidated interim storage. We are still working through that process with the NRC. There obviously is a competitor that's looking at Texas, and should one of those options, you know, from a company perspective, hopefully ours, come to fruition, we would look to move the fuel. I mean, understanding that fuel is moved around this country all the time by the Navy, it's not something that's uncommon. It's just not usually that highly told, but there are fuel movements around the country. So should that project come to fruition, we would look to move the fuel from Pilgrim there until the federal government, unfortunately, you know, finally gets around to picking up the fuel that they were supposed to start doing in 1998.
Okay. Pine, is there anyone else you have access to that wants to?
I don't see another. Okay, Diane Turco, go ahead. Gonna take her a second. Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you for your service, everyone. And Dan, we're going to miss you. You've been fabulous. You're just such a strong leader. We need you. But thank you for all you've done. Anyways, I just want to talk about the Holtec CIS in New Mexico. There aren't any competitors right now. There's a separate facility in Texas that has another corporation that's on that piece, but only Holtec is going after New Mexico. And what does Holtec think about informed consent, the principle of environmental justice that is part of even the Blue Ribbon Commission on citing nuclear waste? Does Holtec plan to expect that they can only build a CIS if there's informed consent?
I don't know exactly what you're referencing, Diane, but obviously, like I said, we responded to a public RFP by the Eddie Lee Energy Alliance.
Right.
We're working through the licensing process that is required by the NRC.
Okay. You also know that the governor has rejected Holtec's CIS, as has the All Pueblo Council of Governors, the New Mexican Land Commissioner, and they gathered over 30,000 signatures of citizens saying they do not want the waste there. Just want to make sure that you know that, because that's been.
I understand that
that's
there is support and opposition to any project, including this one.
But again, too, it's supposed to be the governor is supposed to approve, and the governor has not approved and does not approve. So my concern, so bringing it back to Pilgrim here, is because of the issues here, there is no consent to site our waste in New Mexico. That means it's staying right here for a very long time. And that's the concern of the citizens, that there seems to be not enough attention given to the nuclear waste dump in our backyard. And given that Holtec is using the Decommissioning Trust Fund to manage that waste, we feel we should have even a stronger voice in that, as you have so rightly with the Decommissioning Trust Fund on just the decommissioning of the reactor. So that's something we really want this panel to take a real strong look at, because we're seeing that these Holtec high storm canisters don't really live up to the reputation that Holtec is projecting. I mean, how are you monitoring for leaks right now, Pat?
So we have daily checks by operations of all the canisters' integrity, and as part of the agreement, there is monitoring that will be in place.
It will be in place. See, that's a problem. These canisters have been out there for quite a long time. And you sent me a letter, and thank you for doing that. But you said that it was a visual inspection. So
correct.
Right now, there is no daily radiation monitoring or temperature monitoring?
Not correct.
Is there a daily radiation or temperature monitoring of the canisters? Pat?
Operations checks it daily. I have to double check what they are, but I thought there was temperature checks every day. I will double check that.
Okay, and how
we
about
provide that
radiation
information to the state daily in a report to MEMA.
Okay, so, then my second question, is there any radiation monitoring?
It's my understanding that those checks are done daily by operations.
Yes.
And we're satisfied with
temperature checks?
Yes,
but
he's
not
saying yes,
radiation.
Diane.
Okay. Yes to radiation checks.
I didn't say that. I said yes to the
Okay.
temperature checks as part of the thing, and that information is required daily to be sent to MEMA,
Okay.
which we do.
Okay, great. So, but there are no radiation checks.
Well,
Hold on. We're putting misinformation out that I want to make sure we're clarified. There is a established periodicity for performing radiation monitoring checks of that cask. Coincident with that are the daily temperature checks that are performed by operations that are provided to MEMA. Those would also be indicative of a problem with the casks, which then Holtec and their radiation protection staff would reevaluate what's the periodicity for surveillance that needs to be performed. So I have no concerns at the Department of Public Health on how they are performing that monitoring for those dry casks as they sit on the pad today.
Okay, and so each cask is monitored, or is there a sample cask?
I'd have to double check what exactly the rounds are for operations, but I can go back and look at that. I don't have that at my hands right now.
Okay, all right.
Right,
So that
and
would be my question. Every one of
Patrick,
them.
if you get that data, Patrick, maybe you could provide that at the next meeting.
Yep.
That would be great. And then just my last question, if there ever was a leak or the temperature was questionable, what is the plan what is the next step? for public safety?
It would be addressed with whatever the issue is, but I would defer to my experts on CAS that would answer that question. I don't have that off the top of my head, Diane.
Would you be able to bring that back next time, Pat?
I'll see what I can do.
What the plan is? That would be great. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
Patrick, if you can ever get your hands on an expert on CAFs, if that individual would be available, that would be a nice agenda item at an October and November meeting.
Yeah, we've had them come previously. We've had Joy Russell here before, who's one of our experts with Dr. Anton. So we've brought that to the panel before. There's just obviously been differing opinions and challenges since then from other individuals. So we've made them available before.
But I think the difference now, Pat, is you got 17 casts. You can get a lot more out there next spring. So, what's the program going to look like? So, and I think that's what everybody really wants to know. What's the program? Is it reliable? Can we sleep at night? Okay, Mima, are you looking at those reports every day, or is it like the EPA and it just goes in a bucket, and never gets looked at? So I think that's the level of comfort that people are looking for. I don't see anybody else with their hand up. People on the phone, you have to hit *9 if you want to talk and raise your hand. And anybody else, you have to raise your hand. There we go. I've got
the 688 number, 2721.
I think so. Was that? Oh,
that's Paul, isn't it?
Is that Paul?
688. Who's? Is
that Paul Smith?
Well, you're allowed to talk, so.
I think Paul's a 508 number.
No, 617-688.
Still looks like they're muted if you look at their box.
Right.
Oh, unmute. Unmute. It's not changing for me, PACTV. I'm not able to unmute them for some reason.
Which
but
one?
That's a funny line there. That's not.
Which one are you trying to unmute, Pine?
Excuse me? The 617-688 number.
2721?
Correct.
Yeah, I can't see the rest of the.
So at the bottom of your screen, push chat. And you should have a list of the select participants.
No, I have attendees. I've got,
Yeah, so on the right side, there's a telephone. It looks like a telephone with a line through it in red.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Okay, press that with your cursor.
I did a number of times.
Doesn't clear. John, maybe you have to do it.
I've hit unmute the participant a number of times, and there's no, I can only disable talking, and I don't want to do that.
So that person that's calling in may have that muted on their phone, and it's not allowing you.
I can't.
Yeah, we just got PAC just jumped in and gave me a message. They can't unmute this individual either.
Okay. So is anybody else? I don't see another hand up. Let's see. Get rid of the chat.
If you don't see anything else,
I just see Diane's hand is up again. Go ahead, Diane.
I just wanted to let you folks know too that the Sierra Club just came out with a national statement, and they are in opposition to consolidated interim storage.
Yeah,
I recommend that you all read that report. It's pretty phenomenal, but they're very strongly against this effort.
Diane, if you can send that along, that would be great.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Hey,
motion to adjourn.
Jim,
go ahead, Pine.
Jim Lampert has a Jim Lampert.
Okay. Jim Lampert, go ahead.
Yeah, I have unmuted, and let me just say that 2721 is my wife, who is sitting next to me and has been trying to get in, but obviously has been unable to do so. So I would suggest that perhaps the easy way to handle this is to stick with this manner of speaking with her after I've had my opportunity. I wanted tonight basically to talk about what is the role of this panel and how is it going to accomplish it. And briefly, I'd like to start with something I haven't planned to talk about, but it was brought up consistently throughout the meeting and in many cases by Pine or Dave Nichols. And that is the question of public participation and public information. Dave Nichols asked about, we need a repository. You have one. It's your website. What you need to do is simply post on that website the significant things that are provided to you by the public. They would then be there for anyone to look at. And one of those things, because I heard somebody talking today about a summary of the settlement agreement, and I believe it was a settlement agreement, not any IWG agreement that the agenda was intended to refer to. You have. We spent days preparing that summary. You have it, had it for months. The question is whether or not it's going to make it to the report and whether or not it's going to make it to what you have. I'm going to let my wife break in because I'm going to have to plug this in and hopefully get back for the battery charge before we all run out.
Yes. The role, you were talking at one point in the agenda about the role of the panel. And the role is very clear. It is talk about the decommissioning process. So therefore, I was mystified that you have someone coming in October to talk about from ISO on energy matters. It seems to me that the most important decommissioning issue to talk about is the initial site assessment. October 14th or 15th, whether you count Saturdays or not, is the due date for the initial site plan. After that, DEP and DPH look at it. They make recommendations after meeting with Holtec, and then Holtec has 30 days to have a final plan put in place. Now, what will be cleaned up depends upon what is looked at. And what is cleaned up or not cleaned up, more importantly, not looked at and cleaned up, will wind up in the bay, maybe the aquifer, maybe become airborne, who knows, maybe become a liability for any property the town of Plymouth acquires. And so this is the #1 to-do list, as far as I can see, until 2021. And the fact that this panel doesn't feel that it should be #1 agenda item, or perhaps even given a whole separate time once DEP and DPH look at it and before they make their final recommendation, absolutely mystifies me. What is more important, to talk to ISO? Frankly, I just don't get it. And so I would hope that the panel, I hope other citizens realize the importance of this key piece in the decommissioning process, which is the charge of this group. And now my husband's back.
Thank you. Basically, as she said, or the question I have is, how is this panel supposed to get the information that it needs to be able to tell the governor and to tell the public that there has been a full and complete site assessment, and that what has been done by the licensee complies with the requirements of the June 16 agreement. The legislation, although not what Dan originally filed, does require that the panel have on it 2 representatives from Pilgrim and a representative from the Secretary Departmental of the Commonwealth that's responsible for DEP, DPH, and this cleanup. Presumably that legislation included those people because it hoped that they would be knowledgeable about the subjects the panel has to learn about and would be able to and would provide the information that the panel needs. Last week, we sent all members of this panel and a number of other people an about 11-page memorandum. Question, well, how many people have read it? It is long, but its length is indicative of one thing, that what the settlement agreement requires and what has to be done for a decent site assessment is a detailed and important subject. And if all the panel can rely on is the short reports that it's been getting over the years from its state representatives and the licensee, I don't see how, in good faith, good judgment, or in good conscience, any member of this panel is going to be able to say that, yes, we understand that what the settlement agreement requires is being accomplished. And yes, we know that everything that's should be looked at and done in the site assessment will be done. Let's remember that at a prior meeting, Holtec told this panel, rather refused to tell this panel, that it was even going to look at the potentially or known contaminated sites that were identified in Mr. Priest's declaration, that were identified in Pilgrim Watch's presentation to the NRC, or that were identified during license renewal. Unless this panel can require and ask the questions and require the licensee and the state reps to give the answers that are needed so the panel can really understand what's going on, how are you going to do your job? We're very concerned that neither Pilgrims nor the state reps are going to tell this willingly. They've done so in the past, and I've seen nothing today to indicate that you'll continue to get anything other than, frankly, a 100,000-foot pablum report.
I'm going to break in, Jim, if you don't mind. My understanding from Holtec is that there is a site assessment underway, that the report is due in January from the site assessment. And I also understand from Pat O'Brien that they're working very hard to release some non-proprietary information to us in terms of this history. So we've been asking those questions. There is some process underway. Pat, would you confirm whether that is true or not for me?
So what Mary and Jim are speaking to is a requirement from our LSP that is due the 14th of October. We are on track to provide that to the state as required by the agreement. And the longer version of the site assessment that the RAD, non-RAD that we are working, that is according to the schedule. You can go back and look at my presentation. That is projected for early 2021, which is January.
My question, Pine, would be.
Hey, can I just pipe in there, Pine, if you don't mind?
Go ahead, Dave.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So, couple things there. One, I agree with most of what Jim and Mary Lambert are talking about, other than the assertion that we provide pablum. I can't buy in on that. But other than that, I do agree that, you know, we do want to use this NDCAP to talk about the site assessment and what the site assessment finds. And, you know, that's really, I think, why we're here at this next phase. So that all makes perfect sense. In terms of the deadlines, though, the upcoming October 15th deadline is the deadline for the site assessment plan. And that's going to come in from Holtec to the Commonwealth. And we're going to take a look at that, and then we'll give our comments. And the January deadline is not a deadline established by the settlement agreement for completion of the site assessment. That, and Pat, you can jump in if I go astray here. That's an internal goal by NDCAP, by CDI and Holtec to get a lot of the site assessment, if not all the site assessment work done. And I think that's an aggressive goal, but if you don't set goals, you don't get things done. So, you know, so I think it's fine to set that internal goal for sure. But rest assured, we're going to get the October 15th submittal. We're going to look it over carefully. And, you know, we're going to be willing to talk about our view on what we're seeing. And, you know, the goal of the agencies, NDCAP, and I think probably CDI Holtec too, is to do a thorough assessment. And if something's out there, find it. And if we find something out there, make sure that it gets addressed. So, you know, so hopefully as we move forward, we'll make time during NDCAP to do that and talk about this assessment, what we find and how it progresses. Jack?
So can I ask, sorry, Jack, can I just ask Dave for a second if he means that, I can't imagine that you'll be ready on the 19th to give a report, but would that be wrong?
And, you know, we're just going to be seeing the site assessment plan on the 15th.
Right.
So, you know, we're going to have to dig into it, and we're obligated to do that.
An agenda, you would tell us when you're going to be able to make a report on that?
Yeah, I think we can definitely talk about, and I'd ask Pat to weigh in here too. You know, I think for this to be a really effective, transparent, and interactive process, you know, I think we're going to need to look to CDI Holtec to talk about their work, and I think you folks should be looking to the folks from the IWG to talk about our view of the work, and that's how this process is going to, you know, roll out to the public, so we can hear what the public is thinking, and you know, and use it to inform, hopefully, and improve our work.
And just to jump on Dave's point, yeah, Dave and I have discussed this a little bit, and you know, one of the things I'll look to do, we're going to work to see if we can make our LSP available to give a presentation to this panel that I think would be the same sort of time frame that Dave's talking about once the state has absorbed their thoughts on what's presented as a product. So we'll look to schedule that at the appropriate meeting once we can find the timing for it.
Thanks, Patrick.
Pine, may I make a comment?
Go ahead, Jack. Jack,
So I just want to reinforce what Dave said on our opportunity to look at it. Jim Lambert, I read the very detailed letter and correspondence that you provided to the board. Having I've worked at Pilgrim. I was the radiation protection manager at Pilgrim. I have a pretty good idea of what the scope of what radioactive material was buried and where it's at and what we need to follow up on. So I think I'm in a good position. In fact, when I testified with the AGO's office, I identified some of those areas. So I'm familiar with the scope. I've pre-identified some areas that are concerned from us. I'm aware of some of the additional areas that you included in your letter, and that's all part of the scope of what we would be looking at. So I think you're kind of predetermining the quality of the review that we're going to do. I don't think that's fair. We need to see what is going to be provided to us by Holtec, and then have an opportunity for David and his team and myself and my team to look at that document, to give it a good scrub, and then would have an opportunity to brief both the interworking group and the NDCAP on what our opinion, results, and comments are. We're not doing this in the shadows. This is something that we're trying to be very clear and very transparent about, to make sure people understand. We want the site cleaned up. We want that site cleaned up to the best of our technical ability to achieve. And that's a common goal for us.
Jack, perhaps my comments were not as clear as they should have been. I am not prejudging what Holtec CDI will tell us or tell you, or what you will do. The fundamental question I am trying to raise is, how is this panel going to get the information it needs at the level of detail that is flatly essential if it is going to do its job? We all know that these meetings are short. I think it's probably absolutely fair to say 20 or 30 minutes total time allocated to you and to Dave. And that period of time, I think anyone would tell you, is enough to give the answers that those questions are driving at, answers that we hope would give the panel the information it needs if it's really going to be able to advise the governor, the legislature, et cetera, and the public.
I think there's tools to help us accomplish that.
This going on.
I think there's tools.
I suggested that written answers may well be a vehicle to do that. Is that going to be a job for you people? Yes. Is it also going to be a job for Holtec? Yes. But let's face it, this is a billion-dollar project that we're talking about. Written answers along the way, as these various stages are gone through, the initial report, the responses from the state, Holtec's responses to those, and where are we going? The subject to which the state, the public, and the panel need are all in those questions. And written answers to those, I see as frankly the only way that either the panel is going to be able to do its job, or the public is going to be able to get the information that it so badly needs and to which it is certainly entitled.
So Jim, I think that's a good comment for Dave and I to bring back to the working group about when we do reviews and we have comments and we come to an agreement on the depth of what we're reviewing, how do we capture that and communicate that? It could be a combination. It could be what we get posted on the website. It could be what we bring back and do a presentation specific to, when we have one of these meetings. That when we have a significant document that comes back, we dedicate a substantial portion of the meeting to communicate the results and the comments and that status back to the back to this panel, back to the NDCAP.
And it might, just to follow up on that, because I think you were referring to it, I think would also be helpful to both the panel and the public if both the questions that we have raised and the answers to them were put on the repository. And then, frankly, I am viewing the existing website that Dave Nichols referred to.
And also, may I ask,
Go ahead, Mary. Did Mary want to say something?
Yeah, but his mic's muted. I don't know what happened.
Press the mute button there, Jim.
Apparently she can't ask.
So John, I just have a question from.
No, here I am. Will the initial plan provided October 14th and the comments provided by DPH and DEP and the final plan be publicly available?
Who are you directing that question at, Mary?
Who'll ever answer it?
Well, generally when documents are submitted to state agencies, it becomes public information. So, there is a settlement agreement here, so we have to look at whether there's some nuances there. But, really our goal, and I hear you in wanting written responses to things, and I understand your motivation there. But, I would argue that if we can make this successful, I'm hoping, or I think, at least I'm hoping, that you'll have less need to have us, sit down and write all these answers out. If we end up needing to, you folks write us a letter and we write you a letter back, and you folks write us a letter in response to our letter because we didn't answer all your questions thoroughly or to the extent that you want, I'm not sure that that's the most productive way to do that. And, it's my hope at least that we evolve in this forum to something that is really an effective means of communication. So, our goal is to be transparent so that you understand what we're doing. And when documents come in, we are looking at that. I know that I brought that question back to our folks, and I know that Pat is bringing that question back to his folks. And we have a settlement agreement through the AGO, so we have to look at that. But in general, when stuff comes into state agencies, it's generally available. And, we're going to treat this transparently. I'm looking forward to getting this site assessment going, having something to talk about, and really digging into what we're finding out there and how it's getting addressed.
Well, I guess to me,
We're missing one thing here, folks, and I just want to be very brief. In light of the August 7th letter reply that John and Pine got, all the state is doing is compiling meeting minutes at this point. They don't have the time or resources there. And Jim is saying we got to get our public documents submitted to the website. So we got an impasse here. I agree with Jim's concern, but in reading that August 7th letter, we got an issue here, and I don't know how it gets resolved and when.
You just put it up on the website.
Who puts it up on the website? The state said all we're going to do is meeting minutes. That's it.
No. We can submit. We can create. I'll work with Tori, and we'll try to create a public, repository there for Jim and Mary's letters if that's what they want, and whatever. We add, we have more things up there. The Holtec presentations are up there.
Okay.
There's stuff there. We just have to create a way to organize it, and that will be up to EEA to figure out. But I'd love this to come to an end so I can go eat dinner.
Was that a motion, Pine?
That's a motion.
Is there a second for a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor? All right, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Be safe. We'll see you in a month.
Okay.